Grab yourselves a drink, get yourselves a snack. We have a long video today, a lot to discuss, and we're gonna look at these little guys right here. Welcome back to the Hardware Sense channel, guys. My name is Ivan, and today we are looking at and comparing the last generation HP Pavilion gaming desktop, the 690, versus the new generation, the TG01. These ones, you guys know, are kind of like the Walmart special that I did a lot of work on the previous generation, a lot of customizations, but I was very curious to see what HP improved or didn't improve, made worse on the new generation, and what possibly we can do to improve the thermals and the performance on that new TG01. A lot of people have been asking me about this computer, and I finally was able to grab one from a Walmart. Luckily, they're out of stock pretty much of the new ones, which are going for $599, but the refurbished ones are going for $499, so $500 for this. I think it's a great deal at the moment, and considering that this one, I don't know what's refurbished about it because it's brand new, didn't have even a speck of dust on it, so perfect condition. Do yourselves a favor, grab one of those. If you're in the market to start gaming and are on the budget, you don't want to spend a lot of money, you're having some money to get a console but you can't find one, so the alternative is this, $500. Why not, right? Lots to talk about. We're gonna open them, we're gonna see all the customizations, and actually I'm going to do upgrades here immediately with the cooling solution to show you what you can do to improve the thermals of this desktop. So the specs of the TG01 this year are Ryzen 5 3500, that's the 6th core, no threads, so only 6th core Ryzen 5, still very fast, still very capable for gaming. And instead of last year's 1660 Ti, which is much better, but we know what happened this year, we have the 1650 Super, which is still very good card, very cool and quiet, and it's pretty significant for up to 1080p gaming. So we're gonna test that as well and see how it performs. They did a lot of changes internally on the motherboard, ports and stuff like that, but I'm going to cover everything. As always, I'm going to be using my good old friend, the Side Big Shuriken 3. That's the exact same cooler that I used on 2 HP Pavilion gaming desktops and on one of the Lenovo IDEA centers in the past. Perfect solution for these small boxes. I'm gonna explain throughout the video why I prefer this cooler compared to some towers or some other brands. Yeah, obviously we're gonna do an intake modification. They change a little bit of things about the perforation on the sides, and unfortunately we cannot do much with that, but I'm gonna walk you through this video, and please bear with me. It's gonna be long, but it's gonna be very informative. And if you have this computer at the moment and you're wondering what you can do, you're gonna find all the answers today. All right, first thing first, size-wise, I measured the sizes between those two. Initially, I thought they're gonna be the same chassis, but they're not. The older 690 is a little bit wider and a little bit shorter, where the new one, the TG, is narrower but longer. So how much longer? They added an inch of length on the TG and they shortened it by half an inch. I'm not sure what was the reasoning behind it, because thicker, like the 690, I prefer it to be. That way you can put slightly higher graphics cards. You know, some of these newer SKUs have higher graphics cards that expand over the bracket. Lengthwise, yeah, great, extending the lengthwise. Now you can fit graphics cards up to 26.5 centimeters. I measured that immediately yesterday when I got the TG, so I can see. But the total length of the computer now, it's about 29 centimeters. So 29 centimeters versus what we have before, it's about 27 with the front bracket, so a little bit shorter, about 26 and a half. Tall, height-wise, they're almost exactly the same. The 690 is just a half centimeter higher. Nothing to really write home about, but that kind of puts us in a little bit of a different situation, what we can do inside. But when I open them, I'm gonna show you what exactly we can do. Why I'm using the Side Big Shuriken 3, big wide cooler that is providing not only an excellent cooling solution for the CPU, but because it's 12mm fan, it spins slowly, it's very quiet, and pushes a lot of air down towards the motherboard to cover not only the CPU, but the VRMs, which are exposed on these computers. the NVMe storage, which on the new one, now it's right underneath the CPU socket, which again is good. More air over that. You know, the NVMe performs better when it's in lower temperature, and some air is going over the memory as well. So all that is beneficial from coolers like that are blowing the air down towards the motherboard when you have situation like that, smaller case with exposed VRMs. Port selection on the back, the older 690 had more ports. We have 2 USB 2s and a LAN, and we had 4 USB 3s in the back, where the new one, now we have 2 USB 3s, 2 USB 2s and LAN port. That's it. So we're missing 2 USB 3.0 ports, which they allocated on the front of the case now, but ideally I personally prefer them to be in the back. 2 ports in the front are perfectly fine for me if I want to plug in something real quick. Majority of the IO I prefer to be in the back and kind of out of the way. Both computers have the exact power supply. That's the 400 watt 80 plus platinum power supply that I showed in the past many times. They can handle graphics cards up to RTX 2070, and that probably will apply for the new RTX 3060. So up to 3060, I can comfortably and confidently say you can definitely use that power supply, no problem whatsoever, as long as you can fit that card inside. And in the new TG01, you can actually fit up to, again, 26.5 centimeter graphics cards inside. Speaking of graphics cards, the GTX 1650 Super on the TG, it's a very interesting one. Again, it's made by Foxconn for HP, so it's a HP ordered to Foxconn. Very unique. In my opinion, the best looking among all the other OEMs. Has a full black shroud, black single fan, or what they call the sunflower heatsink over the die. Very good. You can control the fan as all other 1650s and 1650 Supers. So they spin at the same RPMs all the time. You can't even see because it's not PWM'd. But regardless, it's pretty cool and pretty quiet from what I'm seeing so far. But we're gonna run tests and see how exactly cool and how exactly quiet it is. Otherwise, the ports on the back are exactly the same as on the 1660 Ti, which is DVI port, HDMI port, and display port. Plenty, in my opinion. If you're buying this computer, most likely you're playing on one display, maximum 2, but most of the people will probably use just one. Let's go ahead and open them inside, and we'll talk about some of the components that I'm thinking that we should address right away. Once I pop those side panels, I'm actually gonna show you the differences between the side panels, why I think the older 690 side panel was better. Now, hopefully you can see through the perforations to me. In my left hand, I'm holding the side panel of the 690, and you'll see the perforations are going from top to bottom all the way. This was very good and made possible for me to make these modifications and add 2 intake fans, 2 92 millimeter Noctua fans that are in the 690, pushing air onto the graphics card and power supply and onto the CPU, memory, and NVMe drive, bringing the temperatures down by 10 to 15 degrees and computer running absolutely great. Those of you that don't know, the Ryzen 5 inside the 690 is Ryzen 5 2600, 6-core, 12-thread. And again, in the TG is 3500, only 6 cores. We're gonna pair them together and see who's better, the older one or the new one. I'm thinking the new one is gonna be better even without the hyper-threading, but most people will probably figure that out. And now, if you look at the side panel of the TG, which is on my right side, and you can see the perforations, they're only on the bottom. Yes, they're wider. If we put them next to each other, you get about an inch and a half more perforations wide, side wide, but height, it's stopping kind of in the middle of the case. So that is preventing you from adding more fans on the top, or you can add more fans on the top, but it's just gonna be pointless. They're not gonna be able to breathe. And being so wide, initially I thought, okay, maybe the plate inside is gonna be wide enough so I can mount a 12 millimeter fan. That would have been absolutely ideal. If you can mount a 12 millimeter fan inside with this wide opening, that would have pushed a ton of air, would have been super quiet, and it would have been sufficient. But that's not the case, and let's see what exactly they have done. Now first, before I move to the TG, just quick words on the old one, the 690. You guys know the side bracket was extending from top to bottom. With Dremel modification and some patience, I was able to fit two 92mm Noctua fans right here with Noctua PWM regulator, so I can lower down the RPMs a little bit and make them quieter. These 92mm and smaller ones are kind of loud, so you definitely need to regulate them somehow. And of course, the stock cooler here I replaced with this $15 super cheap Snowman from Banggood. Very good heatsink and fan, RGB, and this one cools down perfectly fine. The CPU rarely goes over 60 degrees. I mean, that's how good it is. We have copper heat pipes and everything. The 1660 Ti runs a little bit hotter just because how small the PCB is, and that cooling solution with one fan is not ideal. So temperatures are hovering around 70 degrees, still not that hot, but at the same time it's a bit noisy. I'm curious to see how this card is going to perform in this box, since it's a little bit bigger technically, but we'll see. That's pretty much about this one, but now let's focus on the TG. I'm gonna take that away. On first opening, what I noticed is the side brackets. We don't have a uniform big side bracket now that goes and extends from top to bottom. They kind of separated them. There's one potentially is housing 2.5-inch SSD drives, and yes, that's a good thing, but they could have easily reallocated them on the bottom or in the front panel and just leave that open for more air, or just have that unified bracket again. The other thing, immediately I wanted to see how wide this bottom block bracket is, that it's right behind the perforations of the side panel. Unfortunately, we cannot add a 12mm fan unless we fabricate a completely different bracket here ourselves somehow. Maybe that's a project in the future. But what is possible right now, because the perforations are very good here on that bracket, without Dremel tool, you can actually add a 80mm or 92mm fan. Right now I actually added a Noctua 80mm fan that I had laying around for a while, very easily with these rubber isolators that I've shown you before. A very cheap and easy way, just push through the fan and push through the actual side bracket. That way the fan attaches. You don't need to use any screws. You're not going to scratch anything. You're not going to ruin your warranty. That way the fan is isolated, has enough space to breathe, the air from the outside. You gotta consider one thing. If you're mounting this side fan and you're planning to upgrade the graphics card, try to push it down all the way down to the bottom, as low as possible, so it's not gonna interfere with the shroud of a graphics card that you're putting. I mounted mine further high up, as high as I can, just because I'm not planning to upgrade this graphics card. And even if I put that 1660 Ti from the 690 here, it's still the same length, so it's not going to interfere. But that way I just wanted to have the air pushed up a little bit higher. On the top, technically you can cut this bracket where it's supposed to be for SSD drives and mount another 80 or 92mm fan, but again, you're not going to be able to get fresh air directly from outside. It's kind of going to be pointless. It's going to be choked out. So I am going to use this one just to mount a regular SSD drive. The cables, SATA power and SATA data are already provided inside, but you're going to see them on close-up shots as well. So all you need to do is just get 4 screws, put it in, mount the SSD drive, and off you go. Again, I'm going to show all that throughout the video, how it's done. Very easy, very quick. They redesigned the whole motherboard. Now it's a shorter motherboard. Reallocation of the NVMe drive, now it's from the side. Before it was on the side, now it's right underneath the socket. Hopefully that's not going to interfere with our installation. Memory is still where it belongs, and the wireless card now is reallocated on the top instead of the bottom in the past. And there's 2 antennas already pre-routed. So the Realtek one is included, but I'm going to upgrade it to my Wi-Fi 6, my favorite Wi-Fi 6, the Intel AX200 or AX201. I think I have a couple laying around, so I'm going to upgrade that and show you how it's done as well. And of course, the main course is the upgrade of the main cooling solution, which currently is using that stock fan and heatsink that I'm not a huge fan of. Too many fans. But this one, even without stressing, the CPU is idling around 50-55 degrees in 22 degrees Celsius ambient temperature. So stressing it out, even without games, goes over 60. And obviously with Ryzen and other CPUs, you guys know, the lower the temperature is, the higher it's going to boost its clock. So hopefully with the Big Shuriken 3 installation, it's going to allow us to use the maximum possible boost clock on that CPU. And another thing to notice is I'm going to do a little bit more cable management and kind of situate things around the box. And of course, to mount any aftermarket heatsink and fan, you're going to have to take the motherboard out. But let's go ahead and start doing it, and I'm going to talk you through all the steps. So like I mentioned, arm yourselves with a lot of patience, because this is going to be will take a little bit, and I want to be thorough so people can follow that guide step by step and do that themselves without being worried that they're gonna do something wrong. All right, now that we are up close and personal, I'm gonna try to do this as fast as possible so the video can be a little bit shorter. But first thing we want to do when we start removing the components, obviously try to ground yourself. And if you don't have any of the grounding things, touch a power supply's back on the computer when it's plugged to the wall. That way, it's a sure way you're gonna ground yourself. As the cable is grounded, the power supply is grounded, so you'll be fine. First thing, easily remove the front panel of the TG1. Just there's 3 taps, lift them up, and the panel kind of drops by itself. The only thing you need to be concerned about here is not tug it away, because the LED on the bottom, which I don't think I mentioned, but right here, HP reallocated the green LED for the Pavilion. It used to be in the middle, right here on this crease. Now it's in the bottom, and it's kind of controlled by the Omen gaming hub, so you can turn it off, turn it on, do some different effects. You can change the color, but at least it's giving you some options. And we have obviously here Ryzen 5 sticker. But yeah, this is the front panel. You can kind of put it down a little bit, and if you can reach down and disconnect it from the motherboard, will be even better. Just remember to reconnect it later. This is the connection. That way I can remove the whole panel to the side, since I'm not going to use it at the moment, and we need to be removing the motherboard. So that will give us a little bit more room to work. First thing is removing the screw from the 2 brackets we have for the side cooling, which I think they're dedicating for hard drive, but please don't use hard drives. It's 2021. And the top one is for SSD drive, like I mentioned. We're gonna need to tug the front a little bit, so this latch here on the side can be disconnected from the front, otherwise you're not gonna be able to remove it. And then just lift up and take it away. And here it is, my 80mm Noctua fan, how it's mounted on to the bracket itself with the rubber isolators. These are super cheap, sold by Amazon for like 100 a pack for like $5-6. I'm gonna leave a link in the description below if you guys look for it. As I mentioned, you can put a 92mm as well. There's plenty of space, but you cannot put 12mm, which will be probably the same length of the bracket itself. If it was a little bit wider, maybe half an inch, that would have been ideal, but it isn't, so there you go. And I'm going to show you later how I'm going to connect this fan to the motherboard, which I'm going to use a Y splitter to connect it to the back fan, so both of them can work together in tandem, and kind of motherboard will control the RPMs. You can't really control this one RPMs because it's 3-pin only. So if you want to be completely controlled, get yourself to 4-pin. I'm going to use a RPM reducer from Noctua on this one just to make it quieter. I'm going to show you how that everything is done. And then next thing to remove is this bracket, which is held by only 1 screw in the front panel. So you can unscrew this one nice and easy. And right here on the tab is the SATA power and SATA data. They already pre-routed them for you conveniently, so you can use them when you install an SSD drive. And I'm going to show you how that's done later after I update the cooling solution. And from here, you just lift up and extract. So here's the bracket. The SSD drive will go down here, and we can connect the power and the data. Potentially, if you want another one, you can probably put another one in the back, kind of stick it with double-sided tape if you want to. Run the cables through here. Since there's 3 SATA data ports, you can potentially use 3, but the SATA power is only 2, so you're gonna have to come up with an extension if you want to use 3 drives. But I think one or two will be plenty for this little computer. And now inside you can see what we have. We have right here our wireless card, which is Realtek. I'm going to replace that. We have the 8 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM running at 2666. Unfortunately slow, but I already have RAM dedicated for this specific build. 2x8 3200 megahertz DDR4 that I'm going to be putting right here using Ryzen Master to bump that frequency all the way to where it needs to be. And of course Ryzen loves faster memory. We're going to use that no problem. Previous generation was one of the most successful Ryzen Master bumps on the memory. It was nice and easy, super flawless. You guys see my previous video, it took like 5 minutes to get it done, and now it's still running with no problems with 3200 megahertz. They are routing the SSD data cable right next to the CPU, but I think I'm gonna take it out of there because it's gonna interfere with our CPU installation and a new heatsink, and I'm gonna locate it here. There's 2 more available, so it really doesn't matter where you're gonna plug this cable. If it's on your way of your new cooling solution, just reallocate it over here behind the memory and you're gonna be good to go. So that's one thing I'm going to reallocate for sure. Nice and cool little cable with right angle as well on it. A good job providing that HP. And I'm gonna disconnect the SATA power right here, and you'll see again, very nice, small 2 ports SATA power. Great that HP are actually providing this. And the power supply being proprietary, you know, the power to it comes from here, here, and here. It's not 24 pin, so you can really upgrade that if you want to easily. Next thing to remove is the graphics card. As mentioned, GTX 1650 Super is being fed only by a 6-pin PCI Express power, but this power supply comes with 6+2. So any graphics card that can fit in here up to 26.5 centimeters, obviously it doesn't draw too much power, that's what I'm saying. 3060, you'll be fine in my opinion. And if I lay my hands on one of those, I'm going to try to fit it in here and show you the performance and how it's going to be fitted. And then on the other side, there's one screw only here. They changed a little bit the back bracket. Once we remove that, we can flip this cover, and now the graphics card is free to be extracted. Don't forget the little tab on the bottom where the motherboard is. That way, by pushing it, you can lift up the card, just wiggle it a little bit. Make sure not to tug on that shroud. You don't want to break that. So what I do is I kind of push on the back side of the card where the ports are. It will come up eventually, and that's it. And here is the GPU, GTX 1650 Super. Nice and big fan, pretty quiet. We have the sunflower heatsink in the bottom, 6-pin, located in the back, perfect, instead of the top. In the back is much more convenient for these specific tight boxes. Here are the ports in the back, and one curious and interesting thing they did, you'll see the little screws here for the DVI port are actually painted black. Great touch. I haven't seen that before on other cards, but it's good to see. Perforations for heat extraction, all the other ports here, and this is the back of the card. Again, made by Foxconn. Very nice and little card, and just word of advice, I've seen a lot of those popping on eBay. People try to sell them, and they do sell up above $300. I've seen $350 and above these cards. So just consider this, $500 for this computer. The graphics card and the CPU itself are $500. So you're getting a power supply free, memory free, NVMe drive free, cooling, wireless card, case, all that is you're getting for free. Just if you are, wanted to sell those parts. I'm personally not gonna sell them, but if you are, just think about it. It's a great deal. So what we can do here is start disconnecting all the power from the motherboard. This way we can easily unscrew these motherboard screws. And don't use too much force. Be patient, just wiggle it sideways, not up and down. And if you're not sure, or you don't have the patience to follow my instruction, just take pictures every time you do something. Later you can go back, reverse the process, see what you've done, and that way you're gonna avoid all problems you might have of not connecting something or not being sure what something needs to be connected. So disconnecting the last power from here. Now they added these channels on the front of the case that you can actually route these cables, keep them a little bit more tucked. But I'm gonna use some zip ties and other things to actually keep them a little bit more managed, since I feel like they're a little bit soggy and droopy all over the place. But again, that's me. I like everything to be meticulous and pristine. But if you don't care about that, it's fine. And let me disconnect this back fan so I don't forget about it. And now we can proceed on to extracting the motherboard, because we need to remove that back plate and install our own back plate with the Big Shuriken 3. Go ahead and start removing those motherboard screws. They're exactly the same screws that they're used across and around the whole case. It's nothing different. They're not different size. One by one, we remove all the screws, and don't forget to remove the two plastic covers in the back. This is the VGA plastic cover and the HDMI plastic cover. Those need to come out before you remove the motherboard. This one is held by screws, so you gotta unscrew them first. Keep that in mind. And once that is done, the motherboard is ready to be extracted. You need to move it forward towards the front of the ports and kind of lift up the back side to extract it. And don't forget to disconnect that little antenna right here that I forgot for the wireless card. And like I mentioned, there's two antennas provided right here for the wireless. So upgrading the wireless card will be easy. And I'm going to do this while the motherboard is out. Here's the back side. The back plate that HP have added. This is adhesed to the motherboard with double-sided adhesive tape. Kind of hard to remove, but I'm gonna walk you through it and just be patient. Use plastic tools and your hands. Never use anything metal. Word of advice, if you use anything metal, you can disrupt any of the traces and your motherboard will be ruined. So use only your hands and plastic tools, and you'll see now the case is completely empty, and I'm actually going to remove it out of here and just place the motherboard on its spot, as right now we don't need to be worried about the case. And here's the motherboard. Again, awkward, weird size. Front ports here. We have the wireless card, memory, all three SATA datas, power for the motherboard, power for the motherboard, power for the SATA, 16 times PCI Express. We have the NVMe drive right here, which by the way is Samsung. Great thing to see. Same goes for the memory. The memory is Samsung as well. I guess for this specific builds, HP moved away from SK Hynix, which normally is their preferable supplier in the past, and they are giving you now these Samsung memories and Samsung NVMe drives. And by the way, like I mentioned, the memory is too slow, so I'm going to be using my own. And word of advice, even if you want to do super budget, just get another 8 gigabytes like this one somewhere if you find it eBay cheap, and just slap it in. That's it. Don't play with 8 gigabytes. It's going to severely bottleneck your gaming experience. And you definitely want to have at least 16 gigabytes. All right, on to the extraction. First thing, I'm going to remove the stock heatsink and cooler. And by the way, if you are wondering what kind of bit I'm using, it's T15. That's the star looking like T15 bit on the screwdriver. That one is used all around all the components, motherboard, everything else. So you need to have one of those. Start unscrewing in like a diagonal pattern, couple turns in each one. That way the distribution of the force is equal. We don't want anything possible that can damage our CPU. Of course, we need to disconnect the fan before we extract the cooling solution. Let's see how much thermal paste HP builders have actually used on this one. Then there we go. Interesting. Actually, it's not that much. You can see actually they're not smothering everything in thermal paste. And this heatsink and fan are one of the tallest. Some of the SKUs in the past from other brands and them I've seen half of this height, but this one is not bad. And the fan on top is 80 millimeter. You can reuse that one if you want to, actually, for intake. Yeah, why not? I'm gonna clean the CPU and we're gonna proceed with the installation of the Big Shuriken 3. So what I'm going to be using is alcohol wipes. Just go and gently wipe the thermal paste they applied, which is nice and soft. I mean, I don't know what exactly they used, but I think it's good. It's not one of those brick-like, gum-like old school thermal paste they used to use on these kind of OEM builds. I'll make sure that it's nice and clean. I see a little bit thermal paste to the side, so I'm gonna take one of those plastic things that I mentioned and clean that up as well. The adhesive is coming off, so pry one by one a little bit at the time. Be very patient. Don't force it too much. Just put a tiny bit of a force. Wait a little bit. Pry a little bit some more. Do the same across. Again, use just plastic tools. Don't use anything else. So once you pull enough force with these prying tools, you'll see how it comes off from one side, and then with your fingers it's going to be easy to remove. So now that this is removed, I can show you the back side of it. You'll see the whole back plate is covered with this adhesive. It's super sticky, but if you put just a little bit of force and leave the prying tool there, it'll actually slowly starting to disconnect from the base. And don't get bothered by this adhesive staying on the base of the motherboard. That's not a problem whatsoever. You can try to peel it off, but again, it's not an issue. You wouldn't be damaging anything if you leave it there. And now we are ready to prepare to install our big Shuriken 3. Now, if you want to follow site's own cooling installation guide, you're more welcome to do it. Keep in mind that you got to follow the one for Intel 1155, 5150, not the AMD one, despite the fact that we have AMD CPU right here, because the holes are with the size Intel one. That's what HP are doing across all their boards. That way they can use the same cooling solution for both Intel and AMD based ones. The steps we're gonna follow are very easy and very fast. First thing we need to do is attach our backplate, which this is the backplate from the big Shuriken, and you'll see it says top, where it needs to be the top of it, and we need to make sure that we are exactly where it needs to be for 1155. If this is the top of the motherboard right here, we're gonna place it like this on the top, right through the holes, and that's it. Backplate installed. Now we can flip it around, place it down, and you will see that these 4 studs from the backplate are poking through. Now from here, we're just gonna place our spacers, which are kind of rubber slash plastic. All these 4 ones, they come in the pack, and make sure to place them with the rubber pad. There's a rubber pad right underneath. That one is going to be facing down towards the motherboard. So place that down, push it. That way the backplate is actually going to stay in place. So after installing the brackets on top of the isolators, just hand tighten them using your own hand. Don't overdo it. Don't screw them. Don't do any of that. The brackets are high enough. They're not going to interfere or touch any of the componentry below. And from here, all you need to do is just clean up the CPU one more time. Make sure there's no particles on top of it, and try to figure it out how to mount your heatsink. So this is the big Shuriken 3. Don't forget to peel off that plastic pad on the bottom and clean it off with some more alcohol wipes. You can mount it with the heat pipes pointing down or with the heat pipes pointing up, because the mounting is with those 2 screws that goes into the brackets. And the way I'm going to do it, pointing down towards the graphics card, because the cutout here for memory is on the right side, and that way if I place it this way, the memory is going to have enough clearance. And speaking about memory, this is the memory I'm going to be using. Hopefully it works. I'll report after I do everything. With the awesome name Skywalker. This is the V-Color Prism RGB. And let me go ahead and install it right away, right here on the motherboard. That way, if I mount the heatsink and fan, I don't have to fiddle it with later. Kind of a good looking memory with this mirror finish on to the side. So, I mean, if you grab it on for the cheap price, like I did for around $60, why not? But if you have anything cheaper, use that. They're kind of close to each other, but they're not going to be producing that much heat. Plus heatsink will be pushing some air on them. And if I place it on, I have a very good clearance, about maybe 5 millimeters between the heatsink and the memory. So no problem whatsoever. That will be my preferred way to mount this. I'm going to clean up the CPU one more time and reapply my thermal paste on it. We'll do a little dot in the middle, and then I'm going to spread it around. This is how I do my CPUs all the time. Everybody has their own techniques, but this is what I use. This is what I do all the time. Just be patient, take a little bit of a time, spread it equally, make sure there's no gaps or anything. So you can see now my CPU is completely covered, and I'm gonna peel off the sticker here on the back of the big Shuriken 3. Clean it up real quick as well with some alcohol. And then from here, just make sure to place it correctly And the way the big shuriken is done, the screws are visible through the heatsink. So all you need to do is just match exactly where the holes are, place it on top, go ahead and screw them in. With a couple revolutions on each one, this should get you started. And then you can continue all the way through. Don't over tight. Once it stops, it will stop. It will not let you go further. So it's kind of hard to over tighten them, but word of advice, don't use too much force. And of course, use just a manual screwdriver. Don't use any power tools. You don't have to be doing any of that. And just like that, we have it installed. We have a 12mm fan that it's not too high. That's 15mm height only. Pushes plenty of air down. And as you can see, we're gonna have air coming over the memory. We're gonna have air helping the NVMe drive. We're gonna have air coming down to the VRAMs, so all the components around will be ventilated. Now from here we need to kind of figure it out how to route the PWM cable from the fan. Since it's kind of long, what I did before is I kind of do it a couple times around the actual fan and plug it in, but let's see which way will be better. If I can do it maybe from here, and because we have these rubberized tabs on the end of the fan, it will be easy to cut up the cable through. See how it stays, and then again on here, again stays, and then from here we can plug it in down to the motherboard, and off you go with the installation. Now plugging in here at the end, it's a bit tricky because the plug is kind of landing underneath, so you're gonna have to put your fingers kind of on an angle a little bit here, plug this fan. Now I never had problems with BIOS errors in my previous installs with this specific fan and heatsink because it's variable RPMs and can go really low to 200-300 RPMs. This is what kind of matches the stock one. One of the problems with these aftermarket fans, if it's too fast, if its starting speed is too fast, it will throw a BIOS error. And now it's time to bring the case and put the motherboard back in. Now with the motherboard inside, one thing to point your attention to right away is that the screw that is right in the middle, it's impossible to screw back in. So if you really want to preserve that screw, make sure to put the motherboard first, screw it, and then install finally the heatsink and the fan. I personally don't care, it's just one screw in the back. There's plenty of other ones to cover, so it's not really essential. But if you are particular about that, make sure to do it before installing the heatsink and fan. And the other challenging thing will be trying to plug in these tiny antennas now into this new wireless card because how small they are. The rest of it is fine. I'm gonna just screw back in everything, plug it in, and we'll see how it looks. Quick look to what we have done so far. Motherboard in place, some cable management around with zip ties and these sticky pads. We have the Y splitter here, the back fan is connected to it, and then we're gonna have the front intake connected to it as well once we place the brackets. SSD drive, again I'm using the SK Hynix. I've used in the last couple builds. We have only 3 screws in the back. Screw it to that bracket and facing the SATA power and SATA data down. So once we are ready to do everything else, we're just gonna place it right here at the slots and lower it down. This way, there's about 1.5 inch clearance between this bracket and the fan, so not obstruction at all here. And we're gonna route these cables for the data and for the power right here underneath the bracket, but not yet. And of course, after we place this, we're gonna put our bottom bracket as well with the intake fan, and we're gonna make sure to connect this cable to the extension cable right here before we do that. That way we're gonna have intake and exhaust as well. I'm gonna go ahead and place my graphics card first, and then we're gonna proceed for the rest of it. Don't forget to put the little screw in the back, keep the bracket in, closed. And then from here, we need to take our power for the graphics card and plug it in. Only the 6-pin PCI Express. And then we have the SATA power and SATA data. We're gonna channel them around this bracket and make sure that is nice and tight and connected to our SSD drive. So I'm gonna channel it right here, push it down a little bit, and make sure to connect this cable for your intake fan first, so you don't have to try to fish it underneath afterwards. And I'm gonna put the screw back on the plate, which is in the front of the case. Do a little bit more cable management here with these two cables. Make sure they're out of the way. And as a final step, I'm gonna put the other bracket. And just like that, we have unobstructed GPU. We have the intake fan. Our SSD drive SATA 3 is mounted. Our cooling solution. We did some cable management. And let's plug in the front panel, and it's time to fire it up and see if it's working. Last thing is putting this connecting screw between the two side brackets. And here's my front panel. So front panel, remember, connect your LED on the front of the motherboard. Just like that, we have everything installed. We upgraded the Wi-Fi card to Intel AX200. We added an extra storage, 500 gigabytes of SATA 3 SSD, intake fan, Noctua 80mm, but you can install 92 as well. We split the two fans, and most of all, we added this Sight Big Shuriken 3 heatsink and fan for the cooling solution. So let's see if everything works. A moment's for you, but a whole day for me. I am back with the complete installation of the HP Pavilion Gaming desktop, the TG01. And here are the things I did and some update from a couple moments ago when you saw the last part of the video. First thing first, I managed to finally use this old Zalman fan controller with this intake fan. My original plan to split the one from the motherboard did not work out because for some reason power was not enough to get this fan spinning as well. Only the rear fan was spinning. And for some reason, HP omitted the PWM for the rear fan. It's only 3-pin, so I'm not sure. I'm a little bit confused why that decision was made. Maybe save some money. But regardless, this fan controller works perfectly with this fan. I am getting the power from the SATA cable. Like my previous HP Pavilion modifications, I use one of those splitters that takes power from the SATA. It can output 12 volts directly to fans, so I'm using the power to go to the fan controller, and the fan is connected to the fan controller. This way I can regulate the speed of this fan, because at max speed it's quite loud, and I can tone it down a little bit, pushes enough air. At the same time, it's not as loud, gets really quiet. In the future, I'm actually planning to replace this 80mm Noctua fan with 92mm because it's going to push a little bit more air and it's going to be quieter. This one does a very good job, pushes air inside that we are much needed. Otherwise, you're stuck with passive air cooling. Added storage, we have 500 gigabytes SATA 3 SSD drive, SK Hynix. Very good for all my game installs. The stock NVMe drive is Samsung. So yes, this specific batch HP built with a lot of Samsung components. I actually have another one of these computers just came in, so I have two. I have different plans to modify and do stuff so I can show you on videos. But the one that came, it's a different batch and it comes with SK Hynix storage and memory. So I guess that was different times when that happened. Temps are not anything crazy low compared to the stock. And I'm going to show you some comparisons and tests in a future video because this one is getting too long and we're going to do some game testing as well. But silence. This fan is extremely silent. It doesn't throw any airs on the BIOS, so you're starting with no problems whatsoever. It goes right into Windows. Extremely silent. You can barely hear it. And the biggest problem that I struggled yesterday while I was doing all the components is the memory. So memory proves to be a little bit trickier with this specific version. My older one had no problem. I popped in a kit from HyperX Fury and worked no problem with Ryzen Master to bump it to the desired 3200 megahertz. With this V-Color kit that I showed you, I put in here, it was a little bit trickier. It took me hours to figure it out, the timings and everything else. With the newer version of Ryzen Master, it's a little bit more complicated. So I ended up lowering the CLs a little bit. This kit is CL16. I had to bump it up to CL17 and the rest CL18, 18, 18s. I had to bump it up to 19 just to keep it stable. Before that, it was crushing in games and other tests for whatever reason. I'm not sure, probably not enough voltage supplying to it. but still it's beneficial to have it at 3200 megahertz, even though the CLs are a little bit slower. So finally had it working. Tested different kits, so because the way the RAM is situated underneath the actual heatsink of the main cooling, you're not freely able to take it out and take it in. So I had to take this heatsink at least 5 or 6 times yesterday and repaste and do all that stuff. So if you don't have enough thermal paste, just keep in mind whatever memory you're using, it better be working, right? So I tested different kits, so I'm gonna post links to the video description below to kits that are working 100%. Word of advice, I actually tested one of my kits, HyperX Fury RGB, and that one did not work at all. It didn't want to even boot. It was beeping. It was throwing all kinds of codes, which I was very surprised because normally HyperX Furies work on pretty much anything, but not here. So I ended up sticking up with the V-Color 2x8, 3200 megahertz, slightly slower timings, but it's much beneficial. And obviously we have nice, beautiful, tiny 1650 Super. Very nice card. I'm impressed with what they've done. Even visually looks good with a black PCB, with an all-around shroud, with a big silent fan. You can control the RPMs of the fan. This is a trade of 1650 and 1650 Supers, but it's quiet and it's not heating up too much. Again, I'm going to show you results in the next video with testing and everything. And I think this one is the best looking among all the other OEMs. Dell, you're going to see in a future video, same card from Dell, how it looks, and you'll see there's a big difference. So we're going to compare a lot of OEM cards, so stay tuned to the channel. You're going to like that. One of the best things about this computer is the power supply. 400 watt, 80 plus platinum power supply that delivers 6+2 PCI Express cable, and you can upgrade graphics card up to 3060 now. As soon as I get my hands on 3060, I'm gonna test it in this computer and I'm gonna test it on the older version so you guys can see what kind of results you can expect. But this is absolutely awesome because Dell's configurations, the lower power supply is 360 watt and it's 80 plus bronze, and some of them don't even include 6+2, they're only 6. So keep that in mind. So yeah, overall, I think after the modifications and everything else, it's performing great. But again, stay tuned for the next video when we're gonna do testing and everything else. So I'm gonna show you a lot of things, how well this computer is behaving and how well is working and what kind of game results you can expect. And most of all, silence, because this is silent, and with the fan controller, this one is silent as well. And the back one doesn't produce too much noise anyway. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Let's go to the conclusion. All right, this was truly a tough one, my friends. I was expecting it to be a lot easier to do this modification, but because of the way this motherboard is constructed and everything is laid out, dealing with memory proves to be a little bit challenging. So make sure to install the proper memory from the get-go. That way you don't have to go back and forward, removing the cooling solution, installing memory, testing, replacing that cooling solution. And that proved to be the longest and the biggest hurdle here, because I wanted to match the timings, I wanted to try different memories, and that kind of took my whole day yesterday, trying to go through all these tests and figure it out what we can do. But I'm happy to say the final result is something outstanding, and I really like what happened with this TG01. Such a great computer. I just really wish that the next time when they use this bracket right here, make it wider, make it possible for us to modify if you don't give us the already pre-installed holes for that desirable 12mm fan. That way it's going to be super quiet and it's going to be much more efficient. Now, being the longer case definitely gives us a better option of installing aftermarket GPUs. So a large variety of GPUs can fit in here. If I get my hands on one of those RTX 3060s, I'm going to test with this computer, and I'm going to test with the 690 as well to kind of see what kind of performance we can get. And a lot of people have been asking me what are the possible gains and is it going to fit, and I'm going to answer all your questions as soon as I can, as soon as I get one of those 3060s. But with that 1650 Super, this computer is performing excellent across the board, and anybody that is looking to get into gaming without spending too much money. That is probably one of the best options. $500. I mean, you can't really beat that price. You can get close to it with some configurations and discounts with Dell. And you will see in one of my future videos, I actually have Dell G5 gaming desktop coming in, which ended up around $530 with very similar components inside, not Ryzen. It's i5-10400F, but same graphics card, same storage capacity, same memory, pretty much the same across the board. Obviously, Ryzen beats it in some tests. They trade blows, but again, we're gonna pair them together in the future. We're gonna compare and all that stuff. But again, this is the cheapest deal, $500. Find one of those on Walmart.com or on eBay. I'm gonna post links for both. It's the same seller. I think that's the company that kind of manages the returns and refurbs computers from Walmart. You're gonna be extremely happy. I mean, I got two of them. Both of them are pristine. Both of them look like nobody has ever touched them or ever worked with them. No scratches, no blemishes, nothing concerning, no dust. It's just absolutely perfect, like it's brand new. So for $500, you getting yourself a very compelling gaming machine. Throw some games, even AAAs, lower down your settings a little bit, play with the settings, 1080p, great. This card is perfectly capable to run above 60 frames. Most AAA games today, obviously not using RTX, but again, it's not meant to be. What I've tested so far, I can just give you a preview. Definitely over 80 frames with the settings I normally have on all my games, on Tomb Raider, on Far Cry New Dawn, on PUBG. So very, very good configuration. And with the changes and modifications I showed you, you're gonna be even happier with the silence and cooler temps. And hopefully in the future, when we upgrade the graphics card with something better, temps are going to be even better, because you know, the cooler it is, the cooler the graphics card runs, the more it's going to boost. Same goes for the CPU. But again, there will be plenty more videos coming on this configuration. We're going to compare stock versus upgraded. We're going to do game tests. We're going to do temperature comparisons. We're going to upgrade the graphics cards and do tests. There's going to be a lot of things on this specific one and all the other pre-builds. Like I mentioned in my previous videos, I have a ton of them coming my way. I guess I cornered the market, right? A lot of people are buying them these days because this is actually the only way to get a graphics card and not pay double or triple over MSRP, which is absolutely ridiculous. I would advise anybody, if you want a graphics card, if you want to get into gaming, PC gaming, just go ahead and grab one of those. Just consider in the future, if you want to sell the graphics card and the processor, those two things is going to cost as much as the whole computer. The rest of it is going to be free for you. So that's the clear math of today's day and age and situation. And I'm not seeing it go away probably for the next 6 months, with shortages in mining, gaming, people staying home and demanding a lot of hardware. So buying a pre-built today is the only way to get MSRP graphics cards, get on with the gaming. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Super long video. Again, you guys, if you've been with my channel for a while, you know how I do it. I try to cover every single possible corner and angle and provide you as many information as possible. So ask me questions, anything, I will be able to give you an answer. More videos to come. I have a couple new laptops just came in. Hopefully my RTX 3060 base laptop is coming next week as well. So there will be plenty coming very soon. I'm working hard as possible to go through all the videos and edit and show you everything possible that you can do and have fun with these computers. That's pretty much it, guys. Hit the thumbs up if you like the video, stay tuned to the channel, subscribe if you're new, hit that bell notification so you get notified on every new video coming up. And until next time, guys, you have a wonderful day.